Hello folks and welcome to F1 Live, your post-race show, coming to you live from the paddock here in Imola after what can only be described as an incredible Grand Prix here this afternoon. It had it all. It had rain, it had a red flag, it had a brilliant drive by Max Verstappen, David Alorca, but a beautiful comeback drive from Lewis Hamilton after it all looked to be over for him, spinning into the gravel, and yet still he rises. Still, he comes out in second place after a brilliant drive.
Listen, I'm sorry for using an old football term, but it was almost like a game of two halves, right? That red flag there really spiced it up. And the funny thing is, the race didn't even need any more spice, but it was given the right flavors to produce a race that F1 fans all over the globe are going to be very happy for. And it also brought about what is sure to be a very competitive run for the championship.
Yeah, absolutely. Max Verstappen could have taken the championship lead for the first time in his career today, but with the fastest lap in the dying moments of the race, Lewis Hamilton somehow maintains his lead at the championship. Here's your results, though, at the end of the Grand Prix. In fact, I tell you what. Oh, actually, no, let's do it. Max Verstappen, your winner, P1. Lewis Hamilton, P2. Then Lando coming home in third. A brilliant podium for the McLaren driver. Then a double Ferrari points haul with Leclerc in fourth and Sainz in fifth. Daniel Ricciardo sixth, and Lance Stroll, who we're going to be talking to in a moment, coming home in seventh. Pierre Gasly eighth, then Raikkonen ninth. Esteban Ocon, your final point scorer, in 10th. Lewis Hamilton there, confirmed, with the fastest lap of the day and the extra point for that. Behind them, P11 today for Fernando Alonso, then Sergio Perez, Yuki Tsunoda, Antonio Giovinazzi, Sebastian Vettel, Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, Valtteri Bottas and George Russell making contact, Nicholas Latifi not making the finish either. But I said we had Lance Stroll, and we do indeed have Lance Stroll. Lance, a battling drive. I know you love those wet, dry conditions. You just seem to put it in the right place all the way through the race today. How was it for you out there?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. You know, those conditions are always tricky, but it really made the race very exciting, and in the end, yeah, we came home in 7th, so happy with that.
I've got to ask you, one moment when you went to pass Pierre Gasly and you had to run wide through Tamburello, through the gravel, were you worried at all that you might have to give that position back, or was it all okay?
Yeah, apparently I was in front. I did come on the radio and ask if I should give it back, but my engineer, Brad, just told me to put my head down and keep pushing, so that's what I did.
And if the call never comes, the call never comes,
exactly.
I guess.
Yeah, Lance, well, we heard you on the radio talking a little bit about the gearbox there. I think both you and Vettel. What was happening out there with that?
Yeah, I had some very strange upshifts throughout the race. Like very poor upshifts, so I was a little bit concerned, and it was costing me a lot of lap time, and it kept reoccurring every few laps, and it was just, yeah, hurting me pretty bad out there. And I heard Seb retired with the gearbox problem, so I'm not sure if that's related, if it has anything to do with it, but yeah, there was a couple little things out there. I had a fogged up visor at one point when it was pretty wet, which wasn't helping me out, and then I had some gear shift issues, and it was just a challenging race from start to finish. I'm really happy to take it home in 7th.
And it feels like another lifetime when we were actually going to the grid. The heavens opened, the rain's pouring down, we're up at the top, you scream through the pit lane with half your car on fire.
Yeah,
yeah,
unbelievable. No, it was a bit of a surprise when I looked in the mirrors and I smelled something a little funny, and I saw the brakes were on fire, so the guys really did a great job at repairing that for the start of the race, and like I said, good to grab some points today, come home in 7th.
Really great drive today, Lance, well done. Thanks for coming
guys.
on the show, really appreciate it. As Lando Norris, podium finisher today, comes through the back of the shot. And I think we're going to get to speak to Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki, a really challenging weekend for you, I know, after the disappointment of crashing in qualifying, and so nearly points for you today, but all learning, all experience.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. This is the first time I did in a proper wet condition in the first, especially beginning of the race. Even in the intermediate tire, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. But until the red flag, I think that was pretty good. Yeah, I made a few overtake, and yeah, just after that, after the red flag was for me, it was really shame. I think it was for the pace was really good, because it was really shame that I spun in the turn 2. I tried to overtake Lewis. I thought I'd make it, but when I put the throttle, I was just too aggressive, and I think I went to grass. So definitely this is a learning curve, and just improve next time.
Absolutely, I can imagine the emotions are quite mixed there because you started in P20, brought it all the way back to P10, and we thought to ourselves again, oh my goodness, you're about to grab the points in this race until you ended up back in P13. What do you take from that and push forward into the next race?
Yeah, I think overall this week I just make it tough by myself from the qualifying. So yeah, I think that this week for me I learned more than Bahrain, I think. And yeah, next week tomorrow, next is a first time in the track. So it's completely different situation as Bahrain and Imola, which I drove already. So yeah, just put all together, try to put all together, and yeah, just improve from this week.
Thanks for coming on the show, Yuki.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And straight into Carlos Sainz. Carlos, I mean, coming here to Imola, first home race as a Ferrari driver, you gave it everything today. Are you happy with the result, given where you started, given the difficulties that you had coming into the race?
Yeah, I gave it everything, maybe even a bit too much, but we're here to find the limit, especially in the wet, being my first time in first ever time that I put the wet tires in this Ferrari car. I needed to find a bit my feet. I was really quick. I was catching people ahead of me seconds per lap, you know, and yeah, I was trying a bit the braking, the brake balance, and snatched the fronts a couple of times and went in the gravel. But I could manage to come back, and the pace was so good that I kept the recovery going.
Well, Carlos, as my colleague just said there, you made up quite significant amount of places today. We spoke yesterday, and you was a little bit disappointed by where you started. Do you think if you put both days together, you'd be soon seeing podium for Ferrari?
Yeah, today actually we were very close. I must say that the podium was 2 seconds away, and I know that I lost 10 seconds only by going in the gravel. So actually, the podium it was not far today, even starting 11th like I was starting. So pace is encouraging. My feeling with the car in the wet was very encouraging. Even in the dry, I could keep up with Charles and Lando. You know, we were pushing each other a lot. So there's some positive signs out there. I just need to put a whole weekend together. But today, considering that I was starting 11th, I did a couple of mistakes. First time in the wet and all that, I cannot be too disappointed with the recovery to 5th.
We look at all of the teams where there have been driver changes over the winter, and out of them all, you seem to be struggling the least. You found your feet the fastest out of all of them. What's made that difference for you? What's allowed you to draw so much so quickly out of this relationship?
Yeah, thank you. It's something that I wanna do, and it's something that I put myself as homework, you know, from the winter. And I've been working really hard. I mean, I've been spending a lot of time in the factory, and I'm working very hard with the guys. I'm still far off. I'm still far from being the Carlos of McLaren, and I know that, and the team knows that. But you know, I have flashes of a lot of speed, like we saw in Bahrain qualifying. We saw it again today in the wet, that I was flying, you know, for some laps, even in the mixed conditions. So there's some very good flashes out there, and now we just need to keep working, let the races go by, and everything, all the experience will join together, and it will make me stronger.
Thanks for coming on the show, man. Great
Thank
drive
you very
today.
much.
Well done.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sylvia. He had a great run, and I got to say, and as he says, and as we've said, when you look at the drivers who've changed teams, we think Sebastian Vettel going to Aston Martin, we look at Fernando Alonso returning with Alpine, of course all of the moves, Daniel Ricciardo of course taking his seat at McLaren. He's the one that's embedded himself the fastest, that appears to be the closest to his teammate in Charles Leclerc, and as he says, the work that he's done over the winter really paying off. Without
a shadow of a doubt, he is evidently living a dream. He spoke about that a little while back in Bahrain, and he was talking about how this is the team in which, when he stepped into Formula One, this is the team that he had always wanted to race for and always wanted to drive for. So you can see that passion and that desire to perform very well for Fosse is coming out in the races, and he believes this car is better than the McLaren. As he spoke just now, he spoke about the fact that, you know, he made mistakes and still finished where he finished, so he knows and believes that there is still greater things to come from him. Absolutely.
This race, of course, though, was dominated by one man. That man was Max Verstappen, who hadn't had the best qualifying comparatively for him, out-qualified by his teammate, new teammate Sergio Perez, out-qualified by a teammate for the first time since Canada 2019. but the win was won right within the first couple of 100 meters. The race start on a wet and increasingly getting damper track. We take a look here. Off the line goes Lewis Hamilton, but Verstappen from P3 immediately up and alongside and straight into the lead, David, and really from here, there was no looking back for him.
No, without a shadow of a doubt, there was so much aggression, there's so much bravery into this turn right here, and he wasn't giving up position whatsoever. It was beautiful to see.
Yeah, it was a great start, a really great start from him. What do you reckon of the start, Pierre?
I could not really see.
Well,
what
I mean,
I know about my start is that it was pretty tough with these wet tires. Yeah.
What do we do to talk about today? I mean, the choice to go out on wet tires at the start when almost everyone else was on intermediate, it was a gamble. As always with gambles, if they pay off big. And today it just wasn't your day, man.
Yeah, I mean, we had a pretty big roller coaster through the race. So I must say we didn't start with the right tire. I was in favor, the team was in favor, and then right on the grid, I think before the 1 minute, we wanted to change back to inters, and for some reason we could not. I don't know if we didn't have enough time or something, but we kind of knew we screwed up at that moment, and we said, okay, let's go. And yeah, it was pretty dramatic. I think after 10 laps, I was P last. So to recover in the points, obviously the red flag helped us, but I was 14th, and yeah, I tried to recover through the field and back in P8, so I think that's the positive, but clearly, yeah, quite a big roller coaster. Yeah.
Pierre, what's the mood like within the team today? Do you guys feel like it's an opportunity missed because this is a circuit that you guys know very, very well?
You know, it depends how we look at it. Obviously, we made the wrong call. We will learn from it, and you know, same for me, same for the team, and I'm sure we'll do better next time. Once the damage was done at the start, you know, it's only looking forward and try to recover. I think the recovery was the best we could do, so that's positive. But ultimately, the only thing which was wrong was at the start, and I'm sure we'll learn for next time. Yeah.
Great job, great recovery drive. Well done, man. I'm sure it's going to come together soon.
Without a doubt. Thank you.
Now, we started the weekend talking about AlphaTauri.
Yes, indeed.
Talking about the potential that they had to compete with the likes of Ferrari, McLaren. And yet, well, we got a McLaren on the podium and two McLarens in the points. We had two Ferraris in the points, narrowly missing out on the podium. What should have been a brilliant day for them, ultimately a recovery drive from both, and nowhere near the level of points haul that either expected.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the good thing I like about Pierre is he's very positive. He's trying to look towards the positives, but I know for a lot of AlphaTauri fans and a lot of people on board the AlphaTauri hype train, like yourself.
I'm the conductor of the AlphaTauri hype train, my friend. I am the conductor.
There is a little bit of sadness surrounding the situation or what transpired this weekend. But sometimes it goes like that. Sometimes the races where, you know, you think they're going to be out and out great at this circuit, it doesn't happen. But then we look to the next race, and like we said, it was great recovery from them both. It shows they both have what it takes to drive forward.
You see, this is the thing with today's Grand Prix. We could never have foreseen that the race would unfold as it did. We were standing on the pit roof as the rain started to fall before that race start. We've already seen the replay of the race start. Max Verstappen taking the advantage from the outset, moving into a lead, and he never really looked challenged from that point because the side-by-side moment with Lewis, that move through Tamburello, the damage that occurred to Lewis's front wing as a result of that, Lewis never really able to man a consistent challenge to Max after that point.
Yeah, it was incredibly and increasingly difficult as the laps went on. You could see the time delta between the two stretching, and then Lewis had that incident in the pit lane a second longer because he was in purple. He was on purple. That extra lap he took.
Yep.
But that 1 second that he missed out in the pits might have cost him.
Well, this is it. It was a day, really, as you said, of two halves. A day in which also we saw a lot of penalties being applied across the board. So I want to run down to Sam Collins, back at F1 TV Tech Towers. Sam, because I know you've been looking at a number of the penalties that were applied throughout the race, why some were applied, why others weren't. And in particular, a penalty that was applied to Sergio Perez to begin with from under the safety car, because with all of that rain falling, he slipped off the racetrack under the safety car and then made a bit of a basic error.
Yeah, it was a busy day at race control in general, and I'm not convinced by all of the decisions made that were on track and that came down, because this is the first one. Let's have a look at what's going on with this Red Bull here, because there's a key point to look at this. So the car comes out of the corner, he spins, and well, he goes off the track, and this is Perez. He rejoins. Look at the AlphaTauri diving in up the middle. He's got past. The AlphaTauri's got past. But the Red Bull then carries on to retake those two positions. That's a clear penalty. He overtook off the track. We saw in Bahrain what that means. You have to give the position back. He didn't. He got a stop-go penalty. That's a pretty clear penalty. There's no real discussion about that. Quite why the team didn't radio to him saying, you're not allowed to do that. You've got to give the places back. I'm not sure. Overtaking behind the safety car is a major no-no.
I think he thought it was like a formation lap, didn't he? That under the formation lap, you're allowed to take the positions back. I tell you what, Sam, we're going to come back to you in a minute because there's a guy here that we need to talk to. Daniel.
Hello.
A race and a half today. I mean, we had it all. A really difficult one, particularly as you're just still trying to get your feet under the table at McLaren. I know it wasn't quite the result that you wanted, but how did you find it out there today?
Yeah, it was, I mean, I think I said yesterday, this track is already such a challenge in the dry. It's a real race circuit with so little margin for error. And when we're going on the siding laps to see all the water, and there was so much aquaplaning on the intermediate, I was just like, all right, this is going to be a very long race, and one of, let's say, good endurance. So actually, probably the most treacherous part of the race, the first few laps, was maybe my most competitive for moments. And then as it started to dry, I just struggled really to keep hold of the tyres and to really keep a high level of pace. So in the end, 6th, from a points point of view, it's all right. But certainly my race pace wasn't anything to do cartwheels over.
Daniel, I was going to say it's nothing gained, but nothing indeed lost from P6 position. Earlier on in the weekend, we'd spoken about after FP2 about what you needed out of the car. Did you feel you managed to get that from the car in terms of the grip? Obviously, the conditions today brought a little bit more challenges there. But does it seem like McLaren, that the team has given you the tools that you need?
I think they're there. It's really up to me to just keep. It sounds kind of simple, but keep turning laps. Keep turning laps, and obviously the pace is there. Lando had really strong pace all weekend, and obviously put it on the podium today. So I take encouragement from that. I'm certainly not defeated by that, and I'm certainly going to accept where I'm at the moment, and just work from it. I'm not going to let pride or ego or anything get in the way. It is race 2 of 23, so the road is long, and I'll just keep my chin up and work at it.
And quickly, just to finish, how actually important is it and beneficial is it that just in the second race of the season, you've had rain, you know what that car feels like on inters, you know what it feels like on slick tyres, on the wet, you're finally, well, not finally, but very quickly understanding things about the car that you might have had to wait a half a season or 3, could maybe go a whole year without experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the kitchen sink's been thrown already. So yeah, I think certainly, like a race like today does test you, and certainly there was challenges, but yeah, better to kind of get all of it now, and even if it feels kind of all at once or somewhat overwhelming, I think in a few races' time I'll look back and be thankful and grateful for these hurdles, and I guess it will fast track my progress.
Lovely stuff, man. Well done. Thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Thank you. Now, before we were so wonderfully interrupted by Daniel Ricciardo, we were talking with Mr. Sam Collins back at base about a very busy day for the FIA up in the steward's office. And as you said, Sam, look, I think in those moments on a formation lap, if you lose position, you're allowed to retake your position to go to the grid. Being under the safety car, though, is not a formation lap. It's still part of the race, and you can't overtake under the safety car, despite the fact that you might have lost position if you have gone off the track under your own steam. So, yeah, that one, clear as day, obviously, that he would get the penalty for that. But there were other moments, Sam, weren't there?
There absolutely were, Will. You and I have spent quite a lot of time over the last 3 weeks discussing track limits rules on social media, and people go and have a look at that. I don't necessarily always agree with you on this, Will, but we saw this already when you were talking to Lance Stroll, and this is something I think is quite important to just take another look at. This is Lance Stroll and the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly, who was struggling on those wet tyres you heard earlier on. Now, have a look at this. Lance Stroll tries to get a run round the outside, hits the wet track, and goes off the track. He gains a lasting advantage off the track. Gasly clearly expects him to give it back. He doesn't. Stroll's on the radio to his engineer. His engineer says, no, don't worry, you can keep going, keep pushing. I'm not quite sure how he was allowed to complete that move and not have to give that position back.
It's going to fall back to that argument, isn't it, of did he have the move completed by the time he ran off track? And as we all know, a corner isn't completed until you've completed the corner. Yes, he was marginally ahead, but he was only ahead because he was carrying that extra momentum that took him off the track. It's an odd one because they have been strict on track limits. We saw Yuki Tsunoda get given a time penalty during the race for turn 9 track limits violation. So they have been on it. And as you say, it is strange they didn't even investigate that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't under investigation even slightly, so I was really confused because it was almost a slam dunk identikit copy of what happened in Bahrain with Hamilton and Verstappen. So it was a little bit strange. But that's not the only little bit of race control, because they were paying attention to what was going on with some other cars. So here we go, we take a look at the Aston Martin, Sebastian Vettel in a pit stop. Now, this is his standard planned pit stop, but you'll remember at the start of the race, Vettel's car was in the pits being worked on with the rear brake problem that we heard about. Lance Stroll also had that rear brake problem as well. But because his wheels weren't on in time, he got a penalty. But the team only got the penalty information just here as the car passed the safety cars leaving the pit lane, which means they couldn't take the penalty during the pit stop. So it was almost a double penalty because Vettel had to come all the way back to the pits and serve that penalty. And I feel that wasn't quite... Well, that's not the way it's done. There was quite a lot of time. Although it was a busy race, I think that was a little bit unfair on Aston Martin. Though one driver who it was a complete slam dunk, Yuki Tsunoda. He's a lot of talent and a lot of pace, and his last lap, he went out too many times at turn 9 and was unable to keep it on the track limits, even though the team told him, and that got him a penalty as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Vettel one, obviously, because he didn't have the wheels on at the 5-minute marker on the grid, because they were so worried about his brakes, obviously getting him back into the pits. It took them 45 minutes, and that's night and day. It's black and white, it's clear cut. The wheels are on or they're off. It shouldn't take 45 minutes, and obviously as a stop-go penalty, as you say, he's going to have to serve that independently of his pit stop. It's a stop-go, not a time penalty. But they would factor that into their strategy then. So to only learn that 40 minutes into the race, 45 minutes after the fact, seemed a little bit interesting. Also, let's say interesting that they decided to go for a rolling start rather than a standing start. Anyway, we'll come back, Sam, in a minute, because we've got to talk about what led to that restart, what led to that red flag, and a really disappointing day. Well, what could have been, David Alorca, a disappointing day for Mercedes, and yet they managed to pluck it back. Let's go back to discussing this race and what happened during the Grand Prix, because as you said, Max Verstappen at the front, leading the way, controlling it beautifully, absolutely beautifully. Lewis Hamilton in second with a damaged car. Yep. And then it all went wrong. On a drying track, Lewis Hamilton outbrakes himself, trying to get past George Russell's Williams, ends up in the gravel.
Indeed, it did, and that put a shock on everybody's face. I mean, quite a lot of us, we didn't get to see it live as it happened, so we didn't understand or know what was actually happening there. We possibly thought he might have been out of the race there, but he managed to get hold of the car and bring it back out. But luckily for him, and unluckily for others, there was another incident between Bottas and George Russell.
There was indeed a big one. It was described by one of the mechanics actually in the pit lane as a plane crash of a crash. It was an absolutely huge moment between the two. Coming down into Tamburello, DRS open, very, very high speed. It brought out the red flags and really was a turning point in the race, because of course under that red flag Lewis was able to make the changes, make the fixes to his car, to that front wing, without penalty, that allowed him to go and mount that brilliant comeback once the race restarted, take his lap back that he'd lost in the melee as well, and fight through to finish second on the road today. A brilliant job from him, and ironically that red flag actually helping him out. Sam, I know you've been looking into the details of all of this because it was a day that started to go wrong for Lewis Hamilton at his pit stop, which was supposed to be his one and only pit stop, and it was long, 4 seconds.
Well, David said it at the beginning of the show. It really was a race of two halves, particularly for Mercedes, and it actually started to go wrong for Lewis Hamilton right at the start of the race. You can see Hamilton there getting away with the Red Bulls around him, and he was almost immediately mugged by those blue and yellow cars, one at either side, and he didn't really know what to do, and he just had to find a way to battle Max Verstappen, tried to go into Tamburello, and just clattered the curb a bit too hard. I think there was contact between the two cars, and that damaged Hamilton's front wing. And that will have cost him some performance. So he would have to fight all the way back forwards, getting through the field. But that's where his misery just began. It did continue. As you mentioned, there was also a bit of a poor pit stop. Hamilton comes in. They decided not to change the front wing because they didn't want to lose the time. Then the right front just took momentarily too long. That's why you got that 4.4 second pit stop, and that cost him even more time. You'll see when he rejoined, Max Verstappen's opened up the gap even more, and Hamilton stopping a lap later meant it took longer to get heat into his tyres. But the misery didn't end there, did it, Will?
No, it did not. It did not. And it was George Russell involved in both incidences with both of the Mercedes. A seemingly innocuous moment. He's just coming down into the Tosa hairpin and just gets it all wrong and ends up very much in the gravel and in the barrier, in the wall. I want to ask you, Sam, he reversed to get it back onto the track. Do we think that potentially qualifies? And we've spoken earlier about the FIA looking at some things and not looking at others. Unsafe re-entry?
I don't think it was. He would have had the team telling him what was safe and what wasn't safe. But the reason he went off was actually something we'd been talking about in commentary. Slick tyres on a wet track, trying to get around George Russell, and he just put his foot down a bit too early, slides off the track. And then this is the moment you're talking about. He hadn't got the steering lock to get out on that service road, so he had to reverse all the way across the gravel trap. I don't think that was a big problem, though they didn't even investigate that. The next one, though, which still is under investigation, I believe, post-race, they are still talking to Valtteri Bottas and George Russell, is this. And it was almost a carbon copy. Bottas is coming up on George Russell and trying to get the job done around the outside. Here you can see George Russell coming up. It's got a good view of the Haas there, and already there's an aeroplane accident going on. What happened is George Russell tried to get up inside and tried to get the move done with Bottas, and they were sort of sitting around on track. Here you see, unusual for a Williams to be overtaking a Mercedes, but that's what we're seeing. He feels that the Mercedes moved across on him, then they both got onto wet ground, and, well, the result is, well, a red flag and an awful lot of mess to clear up. And possibly a very, very interesting conversation with Toto Wolff. And just the damage to these cars is huge. I think it's pretty much a new monocoque for the Mercedes, and was that "Are you okay?" or a twat in the head?
Well, Valtteri's telling him that he thought he was number one at that point. I think that's what Valtteri was telling him with his finger, and George giving him a little tap on the visor, a la Michael Schumacher and Takuma Sato at Spa many moons ago. Sam, that moment coming through, that kink left on the run down to Tamburello. The drivers have an agreement that they won't kink, they won't make any sudden moves under DRS as they go into braking zone. Was Valtteri kinking to the right there? Even if he just didn't move the lock left to negotiate that left-hand corner, was allowing that car to sort of go along the straight line. No, you wouldn't veer right, but with the corner naturally going left, it could feel like a veer right. Was that enough to create that incident, or was George simply caught by surprise? Because it looks certainly that there was a car's width, if not more, between Valtteri and the side of the track for George to find his way through.
Well, I mean, on the pit lane channel commentary, I'm sat between two racing drivers, and they were both saying pretty much what you said just there, Will, that there was enough room on the outside. George maybe overreacted to Valtteri and put a wheel on the grass, and that's what started the accident off. I think if I was Toto Wolff, who's really in charge of both of those drivers, to tell them, look, if you're coming up on one of the other Mercedes drivers, so George, if you're approaching a black-coloured car, or, well, essentially, George, if you're approaching a Mercedes black-coloured car, give them space. They're going for points, they're going for race positions, that you're in a car that's probably not capable of doing that. Though I'm not sure how Williams would take that approach, but it is really down to Toto Wolff to have a word with both of those drivers, and probably with Hamilton as well, just saying, look, George is in our team, he's our spare driver, but we've just got to work together, guys.
Yeah, but both of them want that seat for next year at Mercedes, don't they? And before Toto Wolff gets to speak to George Russell or to Valtteri Bottas, Lawrence Barretto gets to talk to them first. He has spoken to both of them. Let's hear from the drivers involved in that, having spoken to F1.com's Lawrence Barretto pretty soon, actually, after their tempers had calmed down. Or maybe they hadn't, but certainly after they got back to the paddock.
Between all of the drivers, we've had this gentleman's agreement that when there's a faster car approaching with the DRS, you don't jolt the steering wheel at the very last moment. I pulled out. I got the slipstream, I pulled out, and just as I pulled out, Valtteri moved very slightly, and that just put me offline and put me onto the wet stuff. And in perfectly dry conditions on a very not ordinary circuit, it's dangerous, let alone on a very narrow track when we are turning and there's wet patches. So an unfortunate incident, but equally it's been inevitable. An incident like that would occur when drivers make small moves like this, and it's the smallest of moves, but when you're going at 220 miles an hour and you're going 30 miles an hour quicker than the car ahead, it's massive.
You see, that's it, isn't it? 220 miles an hour, a track that naturally curves to the left. If Valtteri just keeps going straight, that's a vanishing point. As George said, in the dry, it's fine. In the wet, it's not. Does George have a point?
He does kind of have a point in that. I think what you have here is two drivers, and we're about to hear from Bottas just now, but you've got two drivers here who both, from a certain vantage point, are both right and also both wrong. But both of them incredibly incensed here. So I think we've got Lawrence speaking to Bottas next.
We do,
so,
indeed.
Let's have a look at that.
Let's have a look.
Hi, Valtteri. Firstly, are you okay? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm okay. It was half decent shunt, but obviously could have been a lot worse in that speed.
So can you just talk me through what happened from your point of view?
From my point of view, obviously I stopped for the dry tires, and it was a bit of a struggle. Took time to get them to work, and yeah, George got close and decided to go for a move. Obviously the track is quite narrow. There's only one dry line, and he went from the outside. There was space all the time for two cars, but didn't make any sense, that move. He obviously lost it and hit me.
He seemed furious with you. He came over, seemed to remonstrate with you. Have you spoken to him yet?
I haven't spoken. I couldn't hear a thing what he was on about. I don't really get it. I mean, it was clearly his fault, and I don't understand the rage.
Otherwise, a tough afternoon generally.
Yeah, no points for me today, so that's disappointing. But yeah, it was tough race until then. You know, from where I started, it was not easy to make grounds. But I mean, yeah, need to take whatever positives and learnings from this weekend and move on.
Well, as we said before, either George or Valtteri gets to speak to Toto Wolff. They get to speak to Lawrence Barretto. Now we get to speak to Toto Wolff. Toto, a contrasting day for your team. Let's talk first about the incident between Valtteri and George. I know it won't have provided any happiness down in your garage. How did you see the incident between the two?
Absolutely not necessary, but it takes two to tango. And from where I can understand from each driver's perspective that it wasn't his fault, but if you look at it from a global perspective, from where we sit at Mercedes, it's something that shouldn't be happening.
Do you need to reprimand either of them? Are they big enough to understand the role that each one of them played without you having to tell them?
I think both of them think that they are not to blame, and I will need to make the point that this is not a clear cut for me. Yeah.
It's a difficult situation for you, I know that, and particularly as the focus is already on your team, it's already on that seat. George wanting to be at the team, Valtteri wanting to stay at the team, and this is only going to accentuate that.
I think just George just wanted to get into the seat too quickly there.
Well, he very nearly joined him.
Yeah, nearly. It was a nasty accident. Yeah, it was quite a move on the DRS there, but I guess when a driver doesn't go for the gap anymore, isn't the driver. On the other side, maybe it was too aggressive for considering there's a Mercedes and it's drying up.
Well, talking about that incident, or moving on from that incident, we were speaking earlier on about how this race was almost like a game of two halves. Two halves in terms of what was going on in terms of race incidents, but also from an emotional standpoint. What was going through your mind when you saw Lewis's Mercedes off there? Did you think he'd be able to get it back?
No, you're absolutely right. At the beginning, it was like after the turn one incident, oh, here we go, we've broken the front wing, the gate, the race is over, and Lewis and the Valtteri not making up any positions. Then we saw suddenly that we had the pace and we were coming back on Max, and then it was all about catching again. And then obviously one car is a write-off and needs to go in the bin, and the other one is in the wall with the front wing broken off. So at that stage we are thinking 0 points with none of the cars. And then suddenly we are back in the game for P2, and the outcome was good.
The beautiful irony in all of this is that without the red flag, you wouldn't have been able to fix Lewis's front wing, and that actually allowed him to fight back for that second place, take the lap back, and all of that. David was saying you had like a magnet button that you just tapped it for George and Valtteri, bring out the red flag.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have done it. There's other possibilities. I could have thrown some nails on the track as well.
Look, Toto, we thank you for coming on. We know you're busy. One final question. Obviously, Lewis still leads the Drivers' Championship after that stunning drive to retake second place today. We've got a proper fight on, haven't we, between Mercedes, between Red Bull for the championship this year. For folks at home, for fans of Formula One, it's going to be one hell of a season.
Yeah, it's going to be a hot season and just what we want.
Wonderful stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Thanks
Toto.
for coming on, Toto. Really appreciate it. Always great to hear from Toto. Always wonderful for him to come on. As you said, Lewis Hamilton fought back magnificently today. At one point, he's in the barrier. The next point, he's on the podium. Let's hear from Lewis Hamilton.
Hey Lewis, that was quite the afternoon for you.
Oh yeah, yes it was.
You must be pretty satisfied with the result, given where you were at certain points of that race.
Yeah, considering I was facing the barrier at one stage, a lap down, etc. So yeah, it was a difficult day in that regard. Max did a fantastic job today, so congratulations to him. And I think I had some really good pace in the rain, and I was catching, but just a little bit impatient maybe with the back markers and caught me out. But I'm only human, so these mistakes happen, and I'm grateful that I was back in the race and I could hunt down and get back to second.
That start where you kept it on the outside with Max, you just didn't want to give up that position, did you?
I tried, but it was it was close, and definitely damaged the car, I would imagine, through those bumps. The balance was a little bit off, but still I'm really grateful that it held it together. She had a rough time today.
You're hanging on to the championship lead. We've got a battle on your hands with Max this year for the championship?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, ultimately not the greatest day. I started first, should have been first to the end, but these things are sent to test us, and got a great battle in our hands. Game on.
See you in Portugal. Thanks, Lewis.
We saw him with his head in his hands in the pit lane during that red flag, to have that mental strength, that composure, to come back from that, finish second. That was a drive of a champion today.
Listen, it was so emotional to watch. You stood there, and I sat there and I looked at him and I was like, he looks completely broken.
Yeah.
And it's like he needs that split second to just shake himself off, get back in the car and know who he is, know what he's actually capable of. And him being able to, at a circuit like this, very, very narrow circuit where there isn't much overtaking, claw back that many positions to finish P2 is very, very impressive.
It was an unbelievable drive. It was a lot like Monza last year, fighting back through the field after a difficult race and coming back from all of those difficulties. Something about racing in Italy at the moment for Formula One always seems to bring up a crazy race. But a brilliant drive from Lewis Hamilton. As we said, he maintains the lead of the Drivers' Championship, having taken the point for fastest lap along the way. But he knows that he's got to dig deep now. He's got to dig deep every weekend to maximise the points haul, because Red Bull have got, once again, the faster car.
Yeah, indeed. And it's, you know, on one hand, it could have seemed massively like an opportunity missed today, especially with starting on pole position. But like I said, the graft, the craft, the drivesmanship that he showed today in today's race is what is incredibly exciting for the fans at home. I know they want a competitive season this season. We had a fabulous race back in Bahrain, and this one over here has been exceptional.
As Toto was saying, there's a real fight on at the moment for the World Championship. What a year it's going to be. Let's hear from the man who won today's Grand Prix, Max Verstappen.
Max, congratulations. This time it worked out for you, didn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very tricky conditions out here. But yeah, I think we managed it very well. It was important to get that good start off the line, so very pleased with that. But yeah, very, very tricky out there. I mean, to make the right call, to go from intermediates to slick tires, because you don't want to be the first one. And then luckily, I had a few guys ahead of me who went on to slicks, and I could still see they were struggling quite a lot, even though, you know, I was struggling on the intermediates. They were completely finished. But I think in the end the team called me in, and I think they did that very well, because it was the right lap. Because I went out, the first sector was a bit slippery, but the rest was pretty good. So I managed to get that advantage back. And yeah, after that, of course, it was all looking good. Then Lewis went off the track, so I thought, okay, well, that's going to be easy to cruise home. But then, of course, we had the big crash with the red flag. Yeah, we had to do a restart where I almost lost it. So it just shows you that it's so tricky out there with cold tires. You know, even in the wet, it's super easy to, let's say, make a mistake with these cars. But I think overall, yeah, we did a good job. So very, very pleased with that.
That moment when you almost lost it just ahead of the restart, what were you thinking?
It happens so quickly that you cannot really think a lot about it. It's like reflexes, and you try to correct as much as you can. So it was full lock, trying to not spin, and yeah, it worked out luckily this time.
Brilliant. And you've beaten Mercedes now on pure pace. You've got a tyre fight in your hands?
Yeah, but it's difficult to say, because it was very close in lap times. You know, Lewis was very close to me, and we were really pushing ahead, pulling away from the others. So yeah, it's very close, but it's exciting like that.
Great stuff. Thanks, Max. Congratulations.
We've got such a great battle on for the championship this year. Max Verstappen, race winner. And as he said, so nearly lost it there. That moment, like with Sergio Perez, when he went off, it was under the safety car. Had he lost that position to Charles Leclerc, that restart would have looked very, very different indeed.
It would have. But besides that moment, for the rest of the race, it was pretty uneventful for him.
He was peerless.
He was, but not the same. The same can't be said for his teammate Sergio Perez, starting in the first round, to say, in second position,
yep,
and ended up in 12th position. What happened to him out there?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? And we were talking earlier about drivers who have really settled in quickly to their teams. And Sergio Perez has said he still doesn't feel comfortable in this car. He's having to change his driving style to suit this car. And if a driver with the 10 years of experience of Sergio Perez in Formula One is struggling to adopt a driving style that suits this car, perhaps this answers the questions that we've had all along about whether it's the second seat or whether it's the manner in which that car is designed, how Max Verstappen likes to drive a car that is so difficult for other drivers to get on top of. It's going to be fascinating to hear from Sergio. I know he wasn't happy afterwards, so I'm going to try and get a chat with him at some point and really figure out what's going on with him and his comfort levels in that car, because we saw it today. He's just not comfortable. And talk about not being comfortable, I know you're not comfortable, because we made a bet before the race, did some predictions, and whoever loses is buying dinner. But before we figure out who was terribly wrong and who was even more wrong, we're going to hear from Lando Norris, who's had a brilliant day. His boss, Zach Brown, is going to be super happy. His team won in Aussie Supercars this morning. McLaren are on pole for the IndyCar race in Alabama this afternoon, and Lando Norris has just brought it home on the podium. Great day for McLaren.
Well then, Lando, you were pretty hard on yourself yesterday. Is that just a little bit sweeter today after what you went through?
Yes, I think for myself to kind of, yeah, I guess repay the favour for the team, but more importantly, kind of do myself proud in a way. Or feel like I've accomplished something. You know, feel like I gave it everything, and we did the best we could, and definitely we did that today. So. you know, I tried hanging on for P2 as well in the end. Lewis was definitely too quick for us. But yeah, I'm definitely a happier guy than what I was yesterday, but I think just rightly so, you know. I lost, what, 4 positions yesterday because of a mistake, and probably made our race a lot harder today, a lot riskier as well at the beginning with all the spray and everything. So, you know, I think I have the right to be disappointed and frustrated, but I came in today forgetting that, looking ahead to the new challenges, the new opportunities, and I think that showed. So, yeah, definitely a happier guy today.
So you lost a few positions right at the start of the race and made your life even trickier.
Yeah.
So what were you thinking then, and kind of just talk me through the rest of it?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't too worried. I had a big moment off the start as I shifted into third, I think, or fourth. I completely lost the rear, and I think a bit of aquaplaning as well from the rivers, and almost went right and down into my teammate. So I thought, very briefly, oh no, Andreas is not going to be happy. but somehow managed to save it. Kind of put my pants a little bit, and then had a big hit from the right from Stroll. But you know, just because you can't see anything, so it's not his fault or anything. You just literally cannot see a thing. It's extremely hard to describe how difficult it is going into turn 2 with the spray. You know, you have the flashing lights, but as soon as they're 3 meters ahead, you can't see the bloke. So it was tricky, but you know, it was more just I was cautious. I wanted to make sure my car was in one piece to the end, and I think that definitely paid off, being on the podium at the end. So.
Beautiful stuff. Great job from the edit team there. Apparently you spoke for about 10 minutes. So visibly delighted Lando Norris. Right, David.
Yes.
You talk, because apparently I need 2 hands to do this.
Indeed. Yeah, open up that envelope. What I was going to say about Lando is it was good to see him on the podium today. He was encouraged by Lewis Hamilton yesterday. Lewis Hamilton gave him a bit of encouragement after he was feeling down. You know, surrounding qualifying, and then Lewis said, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take that place as well. You know, I'm going to lift you up, and then I'm going to take that place." And I think that's what I'm going to do. I think that's what I'm going to do to you with these predictions here.
Oh, wow. Okay. David Alorca says Lewis Hamilton P1. Nope.
Nope.
Sergio Perez P2. Nope.
Nope.
Lando Norris P3. Will Buxton.
That's what I'm talking about.
Will Buxton went for Checo Charles Pierre. So
nothing. No points. No points. No points for you. No points for you.
I got all the right drivers, not necessarily in the right order.
Absolutely. I did want to say as well, I think it makes 700 British, 700 British driver podium finishes in Formula 1 today.
With Lando and Lewis's double podium.
Yes, it does indeed.
Look at that, Stato Alorca. Mate, wonderful stuff. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Before we go, we need to look at the championship tables and where we stand after 2 rounds of the 2021 Formula 1 World Championship. Lewis Hamilton leads by a single point from Max Verstappen, with Lando Norris's podium putting him 3rd on 27 points. Charles Leclerc is 4th. Valtteri Bottas is 5th after a disappointing day for him. Sainz is 6th, then Ricciardo, Perez, Stroll, a surprising P9 after 2 strong races for Aston Martin, and Gasly in 10th. In 11th place in the championship is Kimi Räikkönen, then Tsunoda and Ocon, the only other drivers to score points, and all the others are there on 0. In the team's championship, Mercedes rule the roost still, but only by 7 points from Red Bull Racing. Perez needed a better score today in order to help Red Bull mount that challenge to Mercedes. McLaren 3rd, then Ferrari, Aston Martin 5th, then AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Alpine, Williams and Haas, the only teams, I should say, have not scored a point in the 2 races in 2021, but a long way to go. David, it's been 2 races for 2021, and already so many thrills, so many spills, so much excitement.
Without a shadow of a doubt, listen, 2 races in is showing that 2021 is going to be a season full of absolute drama, scintillating stuff, and we cannot wait for the rest of it to play out.
Season for the ages. Lewis Hamilton leads the Drivers' Championship by just a single point. But we said it in Bahrain, we say it again. Red Bull Racing have built a rocket ship. Max Verstappen is coming for Lewis Hamilton's crown next race. Portimao in 2 weeks' time. We will see you there. For now, though, from me, from David, from Lawrence in the pen, from Sam Collins and everybody back at F1 TV Towers, but from all of us here in Imola, thanks so much for tuning in, folks, and we'll see you at the next one in 2 weeks' time.